This is Gord Grant. Gord stumbled into a 35-year sales career after he left the Air Force. Then he got some great education. His business degree in management and public policy was leading him down the road to a job in civil service. And that's when an opportunity to help organizations implement new technology led to his very first sales job. Since then, Gord has had the good fortune to have worked for companies who have transformed how we work and live. Sounds amazing. Most of Gord's career has been spent helping business partners refine their skills. Gord has trained, mentored, and coached hundreds of people from Thunder Bay all the way to Victoria. After all of that, he still considers himself to be a journeyman sales rep because he's been in the top 10 sales club just as often as he struggled to make quota. Struggling through difficulty taught him that how we respond to challenge determines our success. Gord became a certified performance coach to improve his skills at helping sales professionals reach their goals. The mental discipline Gord developed to run marathons and to compete in 160-kilometer cycling races applies directly to his work with clients. So tonight, Gord will share with you some of his experiences in teaching sales leaders how to help their team to perform. Gord's presentation is called Process or People. So big round of applause for Gord Grant.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Abraham. Thank you. For those of you who haven't worked with Abraham in the past, you're never quite sure what the invitation is going to be or the introduction. So thank you for sticking to the script. Much appreciated. My presentation tonight is one that I would normally do when I am speaking to sales leaders. However, there's no difference really in organizations if you're in sales or whatever your company is, or even in a volunteer organization. Many of the concepts that I'll be speaking about tonight are exactly the same as what could be in any situation that you might find yourself in. So as I go through, I'll be dealing mainly on the sales side, but you will get the idea as we go through it. Now, about a year ago, I was asked by Sherry, a sales manager, to come and help her pick the absolute perfect salesperson that she needed for her sales team. You see, the company that she worked for sold a very complex product, and the salespeople needed to be not only very skilled sales professionals, but they also needed to be able to corral a team of technical sales professionals and sell to multiple departments in that same organization in order to put together a solution for the customer. Those people are not easy to find, and she's been struggling to try to find that right person. She reached out to me because that was my career. I spent 30 years working in just that environment where I had to make my quota and sell product based on the efforts of others, which is why I ended up in the coaching world. Now, I do a lot of different things when I'm working with a client. I teach, I do some mentoring, and I also coach. So like any good sales pro, when I sat down in front of her, even though I had a basic idea what she was looking for, I wanted to determine what the conditions of success were before we stepped any further into the conversation. So I asked her, okay, what do you want me to do? What are we doing here? How are we going to know if we're successful? And I was surprised and yet not surprised by her response when she said, I need to find that rock star. I need somebody who has a track record of success, who can come up to speed very, very quickly, because I don't want to babysit them. Now, at this point, my coach antenna's starting to go off, and my spidey senses are telling me there's something wrong. Why did she use the term babysitting? Was babysitting something that she didn't want to do? Was her existing staff causing her some challenges and difficulties that she felt that she didn't want to babysit anymore? So I thought it was time for me to dive into this and to try to understand where was this coming from. So I asked her, tell me a little bit about your past. Where did you get your experience? Where did you take this job? Why did you take this job? If you could do something totally different, what would that be? I was trying to stimulate the conversation to understand where she was coming from with that babysitting comment. And this is what I found out. She'd only been a sales manager for 9 months. That's basically 3 sales quarters that she'd been in this job. And she came into this job guns blazing. She was going to show these people that she was in charge, and she was going to set a new direction for this sales team. Within a few weeks, she'd already fired somebody. Shortly after that, she put 2 of her reps onto a performance improvement plan. And for those of you who aren't in sales, a PIP means here's a set of requirements that you have to do, and if you don't meet them, you're going to join the first guy that was heading out the door. So she came in really hard on this group of people. Shortly after that, 2 more of her people quit. Now you can understand, this is a pretty rough situation for this sales team. So 2 more people decided to move on, and not only did they quit, they went to a competitor, which is the absolute worst thing you can have happen to a salesperson, that now they've gone to work for the other team. The person that she hired to replace that first one that she fired quit after just a matter of weeks. Now, not necessarily Sherry's fault. In her situation, this gentleman got the job of his dream. He had applied for it at the same time he applied for her job. And that popped up, so he took it. But regardless, she still ended up with a shortfall in the folks that she had working for her. Now, given that all this has been going on in a 9-month period, you can imagine the morale of the remaining part of her team was pretty poor. And I asked her what she thought of it, and she said, yeah, it's not the best. 50% of her team had been upheavaled in the last 9 months. Yeah, duh. Of course your team morale is going to be in the bad situation. This is where we came to it. She was out of excuses. She'd done everything she thought she could. She turned over her team. She was being very aggressive in the way she was approaching things. And her senior leadership was starting to look at her and go, well, we've got some challenges here. Maybe we should have a closer look. And she didn't have a really good answer for it. And worse, she was not on plan. She was not making the numbers that she looked for. So that's what she needed from me. When I said, let's have a look at the remaining people. You've got half of your team has been here for longer than you. Tell me a little bit about your people. And it was interesting because she pulled up her laptop and we sat down and we went through numbers after numbers after numbers. She was into her tracking system, which in sales is called your customer relationship management tool. And she was having an in-depth discussion with me about all these people. We looked at lead to cash time. We looked at the percentage of pipeline to amount of quota. We went through number after number. And I'm glad there was coffee in the room, because I was starting to zone out a little bit. But what I discovered as we went through this is that she really, really, really liked to use her laptop to manage people. She was managing the results that they have versus managing the activity that they were doing. And this is what is called laptop leadership. Her entire time was spent looking at her laptop and leading through that, which is not necessarily all that successful, but it seemed to be working in her world. After we spent about an hour or two going through this, I said, I'm sorry. Obviously, I didn't explain what I was looking for. Tell me about your people. And the glazed look came over her eyes because she thought that's exactly what we had done. I said, okay, let me give you an example. Which one of those people out in that sales bullpen right now has their resume on the street? No idea. Which one of these reps that you've got out there right now is here for more than just the paycheck? They're here because they really, really like doing this job. Again, no answer. Didn't know. Which one of your reps might have a family challenge and they're trying to juggle the family situation with the job and get the job done? Again, she didn't really have a strong answer because she was so focused on keeping her head into her laptop. She had not taken the time in that 9 months to get to know the people that were working for her. She was process bound. She was doing a great job of managing the sales process. And this is an example of just one of the processes that she was using. And this is, you can imagine, a sales rep at the top there who missed his or her quota for that quarter. And what did she do? Well, right away, she went back to her laptop. And she dove in to found the data. Because she knew that for that individual to get the opportunity closed, they needed to have this many in this part of the pipeline, and this many here, and this many here. So she focused strictly on the numbers. And when she went, aha, I've got it. This is what they need to do. She came in and leaned on that person. Put some pressure onto them that you need to do more of this. If you do more of this, you wouldn't be in this situation. Now, if you're a sales professional and you're not making your numbers, you're not making money. So trust me, this person is already stressed out. They know that they're not succeeding. They know that they're not doing what they want to do. Adding more pressure to it isn't necessarily going to solve the problem, especially if what they're doing is they think is doing the right thing. So what do? Well, when you apply pressure on one thing, typically that pressure squirts out somewhere else. And that happens. These sales reps who are now challenged to get their numbers and get pushed ahead start to put the pressure on the client. And they start leaning on the client. I need the business. I got to get it or I'm out of here. Well, in this environment where you're spending a long time developing trust with the client, what do you do when all of a sudden you're obviously in it for your own interest instead of for the interest of the client? And things tend to slow down. It gets worse. So what does a sales rep do? Well, if Sherry wants these numbers to look good, I'll put some weak opportunities into the pipeline. I'll just feed the numbers to keep her happy because I got to fight to hold my job for as long as I can. Weak numbers. Now the forecast is bad. And then what happens? The sales rep and Sherry, realizing they're in trouble, start to force the customer to make a decision based on price. So now you're giving up margin to get a deal into that quarter to make your numbers rather than waiting until it was right to do. So not only is your forecast bad, you're doing bad business at the same time. And as a result, you end up in this situation where nobody really is happy with the forecast. Particularly Sherry, who's spending hours and hours each week I say manipulating. Let's use the word massaging the numbers to make them look better than they were. That's what happens when you are in the process of only managing the outputs. We're going to flip over now. If you were to manage that same situation where you're managing the people, a missed quota shouldn't be a surprise. If you're out in the field working with your team, you're going to know what's going on with those opportunities because you've been out there working it with them. It's not as difficult as trying to do the forecast that way. Of course, you're going to check into the activity system. I'm not against all these systems. I think they're really important for tracking. You can't have success unless you know what you're doing. But at the same point, when you've got a number that doesn't seem right, just don't go with it. This is a time now to ask why. The numbers are bad, but why? What's happening? And dive into the why, not just to reinforce that number itself. And then from there, moving into what can I do as a leader to work with that person? All of us have the FUDs, the fear, uncertainty, and doubts. What can I do to help that person get over those fears or those uncertainty and what's making them doubt their capability or their opportunity to close this piece of business. And by working with them to understand that, it might be a training situation, but it might just be a little reinforcement that I've got your back. I can look after you. I'll make this work. That's the air cover. Senior leaders and managers directly, particularly when somebody's suffering, quite often need to provide that umbrella coverage for the troops on the ground so that they can look after their people. And if you do that, morale's going to go up and people are going to recognize that you are on their side. And when you've worked with them for a significant period of time, you can understand, what do I need to do to prevent this from happening next quarter? Because I want to make sure that this sales rep is going to be on plan when it comes time for the end of the next quarter. So that is the difference really between having the same data and responding to it in a different fashion. With all this going on, I mean, this is Sherry coming in, guns blazing, bad morale, reps leaving, 50% of her team's new. Plus, you know now that she's stuck in a process, and this is where she should be working. Where do you think I started with all this going on? Back, okay, knowing the people, yeah. Lots of good reasons, but I went right back to what she hired me to do. I was brought onto that account to help her find that magic salesperson. So that's what I did, even with all this going on. And the reason that I did that is that not only was Sherry stuck in this process-bound world, that's the nature of sales. Most of the sales organizations out there are going to function exactly the same way. Certainly her senior leadership grew up in that. So they're seeing her doing exactly what they would have done, even though she was not getting the results that she needed. So I dug in and I helped her find that sales rep. It might not have been the savior she was looking for, but we did find the individual. The challenge with Sherry is that she didn't understand that she was now part of that circle, that first circle in the process. She'd always been a successful sales rep. Great sales rep made her the manager. This is the first time ever that she could all of a sudden realize, goodness, I am on the path. And we talked about it. I said, I'm guessing you've got 1 quarter to show improvement, and if you're not on plan by the end of 2 quarters from now, you're gone. And she had to agree that, yeah, that was the path she was on. By working with her over a period of time and helping her develop those skills while we looked for that individual to support her sales, we recognized that change is difficult. It takes a lot of courage to change something that's been going on in organizations or in your own life forever. And by spending the time together, we were able to make minor changes. I mentioned at the start of this talk that I do 3 things. I teach, I mentor, and I coach. The 4th thing that pops in for consultants is that we are the natural fall guy when things go bad. Right? So by having me on the team, we could make minor changes and minor tweaks to it. And she didn't have to summon up the same level of courage that it would take for her to make that change. Because if it all went south, you can always blame the guy who's on a contract and is headed out the door. So that was another reason why we decided to stay and just do exactly as she needed. Here's a few thoughts I thought I would throw together from the presentation just to give you an idea of what you might take from it. We're all guilty of protecting the process. It's not uncommon for us to religiously adhere to a bad process because it's the one we've been given and it's the one we know, and gosh darn it, I'm going to stick with it, right? Rather than make a change and do something different. So sticking to the process sometimes is the right thing, but in everything we do, we should be challenging the status quo, even just a little bit. Is this the right thing to do? Is this right for me? And by challenging the status quo, you can make some changes. Laptop leadership is fairly common. We're not going to get away from that. I mean, I sold IT forever. I get the fact that we're attached to these things. But when you get the data and you're working with people, use the data to help you understand what's going on and go and ask. I've got this number, your numbers are off, I can't understand, help me understand what's happening here. And use it as an opportunity to engage rather than disengage by staying attached to them. To do better before you do more. This is the quality versus quantity scenario. Improve what you're doing before you start doing more. Because if what you're doing more isn't working, doing more of it is going to get you worse off. So do better before you can do more. Make the small changes. Small changes are a lot easier to do, and cumulatively, change after change after change makes an incredible difference to your success. As a runner and a cyclist and hopefully soon to be triathlete, you learn that each time you're in the pool, you're on a bike, you're on a run, that you can't just run the whole distance the first time. You have to put a little bit of effort in over and over again. And pretty soon, you're doing the distances. You've run your marathons. You've run the big bikes. But you can't do it the first time out. As I say, you can't eat the elephant with one bite. And as a leader, you can't control the results. We like to think we can. It's impossible. The result is the result. The only thing you can control is the input that you put into it that determines the result. So if you're not getting the results you want, you need to come back and determine, what do I need to do with my inputs? So with that, I will turn it back to Abraham. And if you have any questions, please grab me at the break. Thank you very much.